To our webinar, Capturing Accurate Commercial Forestry Value, which we're really looking forward to sharing information about our company and about our capability. In terms of who's here today from GSI, well, there'll be two principal speakers, myself and Maurice. I'll introduce us in a minute. And then we have two of our colleagues also attending the webinar, Mark Howie, who's our Chief Engineer based back in the UK. Mark's main role is the implementation of all our projects and all our forestry projects, and indeed building out our platform, our technology platform to support the forestry results. We also have another of our colleagues, Stuart Miller, on board. He's our head of sales, and I would, if there's any follow-up, any questions you'd like to ask us, whatever they are about us, a company, or how we can help you, or partnership opportunities, then Stuart's the man to contact at the end of this, either by email or whatever. His details will come right up at the end on the last slide. In terms of introducing the two speakers, then myself, Peter Young, I'm the CEO of the company. I've been with it about just coming on 3 years now, joined in the middle of 2018. I have a long history in the space, geospatial and downstream world over the last 25 years or so. Most of that based in Europe, but some experience in North America as well. I joined GSI because it really did offer me, I stepped down from a big role in UK and Europe, and it offered me a real opportunity to get involved with a very exciting a startup company, which GSI is. We'll be telling you more about us in a minute. Second and main speaker is Maurice LeBlanc, who's our head of forestry, and he'll be, that was Maurice just waving there, he'll be running you through the main part of the webinar today, which is the live demonstration. Now, Maurice, in terms of background, as I say, is our head of forestry. He's a registered professional forester based in Canada, actually in New Brunswick. So, without further ado, let me tell you a wee bit just about what we're going to do today. So I'll do a very brief intro to GSI, talk a little bit about our process and how we work and how we put things together on our platform, a little bit about our work in North America that we've completed over the last few years, which is now pretty substantial. And then, as I say, we'll be moving into the live demonstration with Maurice. And then a little bit about, Maurice will also put up a slide in terms of talking about the validation of some of those results that we've achieved in North America today. So all in all, about 45 minutes. First bit, the introduction, then the live demo. Without further ado, let me just tell you about who we are. I think the probability is that you haven't heard of us before, nor what it is what we do. We are a specialist in forestry. That is our core focus area, is the monitoring of forestry, land and land use, land cover and carbon, where we believe we can support you and customers like you in commercial value. That's what we're about. It's about, our focus is on commercial forestry, not on principally supporting areas like World Bank and United Nations. It's primarily on the commercial side of forestry. We have very deep roots going back to 2013 in environmental science. That's the genesis of the company. And what we're about is being able to pull together remote sensors from satellites, but also from other sensor platforms as well, like UAV drones, aerial photogrammetry, and so on, which we'll demonstrate to you in a moment. And what we're about is the combination of remote sensing and artificial and machine learning. That is our secret sauce, if you like, and that's what we've been working on since our inception a few years back, 2013, 2014. In terms of who we are and where we've come from, as I say, we were founded back in 2013 with some work that was going on at postdoc level here in the UK. A few people working on their PhDs. I've contributed a lot to the development of GSI since then, and in creating our IP where we've now successfully registered and had approved our patent in the US. So we're based in the little picture down your right-hand side. There's actually Edinburgh in Scotland is where we're located, but we do have remote offices both in the US and in Canada. And as I say, our real focus is around the Earth observation, remote sensing, and artificial intelligence. Since 2016, 2017, this slide shows you the coverage we've actually done through commissioned projects through live customers in the US and Canada. So if you have a quick look in terms of number of states, forestry projects we've covered there, it's totaling up to some 34 million acres so far. It's pretty substantial. If you add in Canada on the back of that, then you're adding another further 9 million acres as well. So somewhere north of 40 million acres, which is, I think, by any measure, a pretty substantial surveying that we've done, all from remote sensing and all based on commissioned projects. This is not research work. This is not R&D. This is for commercial contracts. Now, in terms of how we look at life and how we go about it in the terms of our platform that we've developed, key to us is around the ground survey, the reference data, the training data that is essential to what it is we do. And then we're combining that with satellite imagery. Most of our sourcing here is open source data. We're big users of Landsat, NASA, but also the Sentinel satellites under the Copernicus program in Europe. So that's open source data that we're taking and using at 10-meter resolution. And then, as I said, we'll combine that with other sources of data. For forestry, the key one is obviously LiDAR. And we will perform these operations to provide, at the end of the day, what we are about is providing analysis-ready data for our customers. That's what they want. So it's all what we're doing, what we're providing is majority customer-driven. This is not about R&D or engineering. This is what they want. Focus is on the analysis-ready data to meet those specific needs of the clients. So now I'll hand over to Maurice, who's going to take you forward on the live demo.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. So the particular area that we're going to focus in on for this demo is a data set that we produced last year. And it's located, just for scale here, you can see on the east coast of the US in the southern area. It spans from Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina into Georgia. So it's a pretty large data set. In total, this is about 40 million acres of extent, and it covers around 20 million acres of forest. So I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to flip over to, and the first thing I'll point out is the attributes that we're going to go over today that we developed for this particular project is the species, and there's several variations of that, and I'll go over all of those. There's canopy closure and height. So the first thing I'll do, actually the first thing I'll mention is that you'll notice I'm just in a Google Chrome browser right now, and this is a geospatial portal that we've developed, customized for us. And so it allows us to manipulate some of the data that we present. And this is great for doing this type of purpose for demos like I'm doing right now. But this is also a tool that we use in any engagement with a client, because what we do is these portals are drawn up, customized for any particular engagement. So and they're all secured, password protected. So anytime we get into an engagement with a client, we produce a portal specific to a project, give the credentials over, and so this becomes a mean of us being able to but to be able to view information in the same place, so we know, especially when a project is active, when it's not the final version yet, we want to share some results, have people look at it. It's an easy way for anyone who doesn't have a lot of GIS experience, can go across the company, many eyes can go on it. So it's very simplistic to use, which is great. So I'm just going to dive right in here and zoom into an area, because diving in and seeing the detail up front is where the magic really comes alive. So right now we're looking at height of trees. Let it refresh here. And you'll notice the resolution here is very good. And also a neat little function of this portal is I can clone the screen here and remove that. So now I can have an image in the background. It's cloned on both sides, the same image, so I can now see on either side of the screen and make some comparison. And you also notice that my cursor on the right side, as I move it around, there's a dot on the other side of on the left side of the panel that traces exactly the same location. So I can go look and say, oh, I want the spot right here. Well, I can see that it's the same spot on the other side. So it becomes very handy to localize yourself in an area. So zooming in a bit further, so you can now see that we are only, I'll zoom it over here. You'll notice we are in fact only predicting results in the forested area. We actually blank out the non-forested areas, so we do a good job at masking out any non-forested areas and really dive into the areas that are forested. And if I zoom further just to see the comparisons now, so you can start seeing that in fact, it is picking up a really good difference in height in the trees. And I'll mention we use LiDAR in the training to produce this data set, but it's not LiDAR itself. This is there's not full LiDAR coverage in this area. So we use LiDAR as a sampling method, and then we project heights across the board. So this is not raw LiDAR that you're looking at. This is a specific product that we produce for this area. One thing I'll point out is once in a while you'll see areas like this where it looks forested, but because it's a hollow, we're saying it's a height of 0. The issue here is the image in the background is just your standard high resolution image that's can be quite old. Therefore, it's not up to date. And I'll just flip on a Sentinel-2 image here that is from 2019. And in fact, you can see it's been harvested since. Having both sets of images is handy. High resolution is nice because you see more detail, but you just have to be aware that it may not be up to date. So you have to be aware of that whenever you're validating these results. I'm going to flip over, and the other thing I'll point out is anytime you click on the map on any particular raster, there's usually a tool tip there that shows you exactly the height for that pixel that we're presenting. And I'll mention the pixel size here that we're predicting is 10 by 10 meter, which is roughly 30 feet by 30 feet. I'm going to flip on canopy closure here, and canopy closure here for this particular project is any crown area above 15 feet in height, so around 5 meters. So any tree greater than 5 meter, 15 feet is included in this canopy closure. However, that can be set differently depending on the client need. We can adapt that as well. So this is a surrogate for stocking. So any well-stocked area is going to be very high. Low-stocked areas are going to be low. And it'll in fact pick up areas that have been thinned. You can see like right here. Hold on. Put that off. Now this was likely thin in the past, which is why you're seeing a difference from its neighbor. So you can pick up some recent commercial thinning in the area. The other attribute I'll bring up is species. And what I'm showing right now is just a broad species group. So this is taking species, breaking it up into softwood and hardwood, into 25% increments. So we've got pure hardwoods and considered 75% and above. Pure softwood is 75% and above for softwoods, and then you have the mixtures in between. So pretty clear. I'm going to zoom in here an area to show the difference in how it's in fact picking up the difference between the two. You'll see here, it's picking up the mixed conditions over here, pretty pure hardwood in the middle, and flipping over to pure softwood. I'll just pick out another area to show here. So you can see this is not pure one way or the other. There's a mixture in both sides. There's a higher percentage of hardwood over here. There's a higher percentage of softwood on this side. And then you'll have some patches of pure hardwood and pretty pure softwood. So it's doing a really good job at differentiating between those types of conditions. And I'll mention, so in this case here, this is not a final prediction result. It's not a classification prediction. This is a summation of individual species that we predict, because we actually predict at the individual species level, not at a classified level. So here I'm showing you the individual species layers. So I'll flip over to loblolly pine. This is very common for loblolly pine plantation. I'm just going to zoom out a bit so you can see. And I'm going to turn off this other side now. So the loblolly pine plantations are clearly much higher in percentage. And you'll see on the side here. So this is, again, we're predicting at an individual species level, and every single species has a percent composition for each pixel. So if I was to sum, and there's an individual layer for every single species, and if I was to sum every single pixel, the sum of the percentages for that one pixel will add up to 100%. So it's a full composition label per pixel, and this is basal area derived. You can see loblolly pine. And you'll notice that there's some artifacts that are not perfect. You'll see very low percentages following into these drainage areas. That's likely not the case. So there's always a bit of cleanup. What I'm showing you right now is the raw. But we like to leave it that way because clients may have specific needs, and how they want to clean that up could be very different. But that's an easy post-process. Setting threshold, say if it's any less than 5% of a species, just take it out. It's likely not there, and we'll get their input and customize it for any one client's need. I'll flip over to a different species here. Here's ones that you will find in the seeps more wet areas. You can see it's showing up much higher percentage in those wetter areas. Bald cypress is another one that's pretty common. You'll see it'll map that out pretty well. And so what you're seeing here, that this list here, we have about 20 odd species, but that's not the full list. There's actually around 60 species that we predicted for this area. There's just a lot of them, and many of them have such a small percentage of composition that we just took them off for simplicity and just combined them into this other hardwood category or other softwood category. But you can see it actually adds up to a significant amount in certain areas. But each species itself has a very small proportion. But it's nice to have. And if any particular client wants to see that full detail, we can certainly provide that. It's just we made it a bit simpler for the sake of this presentation. So that's the main species layer, or the main attributes layer that we did for this project. And what I showed you so far is all of these raw, what we consider fairly raw raster layers, right? So these are all pixels. Every pixel is predicted individually it doesn't know what its neighbor is doing. So it's very independent. Every single pixel has its own prediction, and just regardless of its neighbor. Very useful as a base layer, very useful as a starting point. But on its own, it can be, raster layers are not really good for analysis. They're a good base, but by themselves, they're very hard to work with other than a visual like we're doing right now. So it's easy to look at. But in terms of analysis, crunching the numbers, analytics, they're great as the base to provide that, but on their own, they're not as useful. So what we do, and again, this next step is really where it gets into individual clients' needs. And I'll show you an example here with this particular layer. Is we'll take it now and go from individual pixels that are independently predicted and start grouping them together and making some cohesive decisions around how to group these. And so you can see that this is the raw, and here's an aggregated level. So it's grouping together like pixels and more or less blending the conditions together to produce patches. So this is the starting point for creating stratification. Right now, this is starting to look a lot more like stand boundaries, right? But this is only species at this point. But we can do that with all of these other layers. We don't have them on here, but we can do the exact same thing. So for example, height, if you say you want different height classes, say you wanted increments of 25 feet, you would have 5, 6 classes of similar to what I just showed you. You'd start aggregating those independently, creating these similar stand boundaries or height boundaries. And then you can do that for whatever attributes that you want. And then when that happens, now you've got individual layers and you can start combining them together and producing some rules around how do you want individual polygons to be combined. And that's all client specific. Some clients would rather have species combined together. That's more important, whereas another client may want the size to be combined together. So because what will happen is you'll end up with, when you start cutting these layers one on top of each other, you'll end up with parcels that are, or polygon stands that are polygons that are too small for you. So you just have to manage them somehow, and setting that minimum stand size is important. So right now I'm just using 1 acre. So you've got fairly small patches, but you're going to create a lot more pieces when you start combining layers. And we can get pretty sort of around how do we combine those polygons with those small polygons to create actual stand boundaries that are in fact start looking more like a forest inventory. And then for all the stand polygons, we can actually give you the exact proportion of species for each polygon. So this polygon may in fact be, actually like a pure hardwood here. This one may in fact be 98% hardwood, and we'll give you that value. And the same for height. We'll say the average height for this stand is 72 feet. So, and we can give you some standard deviations, minimum, maximum, all that kind of general statistics for any one polygon. So every polygon then, every stand becomes unique. Yeah, so that is it for showing in the portal here. And I'm just going to flip back and talk a little bit about validation of results. So like I mentioned when I was showing height, typically height is within 10 to 15 feet of accuracy, which is not as good as LiDAR, of course, but you saw the extent of the size that we can produce. That's a very large area. And if you were to ask for a height layer at that extent, the difference in cost from LiDAR to what I just showed you is a fraction of the cost. So it's enough to be able to at least get a sense of merchantability using height. And so it certainly allows you to get quite far, to do some delineation, do some estimates on volume and things like that. So that gets you very far down the road at a fraction of the cost. And so if at that level, if you need more accuracy for any specific spot, you can either ground truth or things like that. So you can combine different sources of information once there's an area specific that you want to know more about. On the species side, we don't, the best way, of course, to validate any of these measures is having ground plots. We simply don't have ground plots for that area, but we did do a project in Canada, in Ontario. This was about a 2 million acre project where we did have several hundred plots available to us, and we used that to do some validation. And you know, the map here is showing you, it's a bit complex, but I'll break it down for you here. And so we're showing the lead species now. So for every pixel, I showed you we have individual layers for individual pixels of individual species. And this is just simply showing you which layer is the dominant species for any one pixel. And I've done the same with the plot itself, colored it the same way, leading by leading species. And now just by superimposing them, you can see you want those things to match, right? So the two colors to match, and wherever you've got these green arrows, that's where the plots have matched, right? And then you'll have some that don't match. It's never perfect, but you can see overall that it is doing a really good job. So that's a kind of a qualitative approach to things. And then we do a quantitative analysis as well. So R squared. So this is looking at all plots across all species, coming up with a R square for each particular species, see how well they perform. And you'd see the results for this project were very good. Fairly complex species here as well. And we found that anytime you get over 50%, that's a pretty good estimate for something like this, because this is all at the pixel level. So once you start aggregating at polygons, those accuracies will no doubt go up. And that's it. So I'm going to hand it back over to Peter and field any questions that may have come up.
Thanks, Maurice. Yeah, a few questions coming in. So one from Jeff Smith. I missed the source data for the height information, but you said the training used LiDAR. What was the source data? Yeah,
so we do use LiDAR, and this is just open source LiDAR that is available on USGS website. Anybody can download it, but it's spotty. It's different times, the different ages, and we use that as our base training. Of course, there's a lot of filtering and growing over, depending on how old it is, before we can actually use it. But yes, that is the source data is USGS LiDAR.
Okay, another one, Maurice. Are the tree attributes shown the only ones we can do?
They're not. For this particular, I'll just flip back into the portal just to be able to show. But no, we certainly can do many more species and more attributes than what I showed. This was just a simplified version. So right now we've got essentially species, crown closure, and height, and derivatives of species as well. And but we can do DBH, we can do density, so trees per acre, basal area. Those are the common ones, and then from there, we can produce, depending on how far deep you want to get in. Once you have all those attributes, you can actually develop a tree list for any one specific polygon or property or wherever, and we produce a FVS ready output that comes out of our system that is ready to be ingested by FVS, and then from that point on, you can convert things to volume, project growth, and assign any of those yield curves for the future.
Okay, thanks. I had a second one from Jeff earlier. Do you have an explanation for the difference in accuracy at the species level?
Yeah, that one's, what we do is we use a number of images through the year, and there's every species has a very unique phenology. And so it really depends on how close they are to another species. Sometimes two species look very much alike. So sometimes it's difficult to differentiate those two. It could be the timing of the images themselves. There's a number of factors, but we always do an analysis ahead of time to try to get a sense of what we think, whether or not we'll have issues on the accuracy, depending on the images available.
Okay, another one in, Maurice, if I had a specific area I'm interested in, not covered by this demo here, how long would it take to produce? So nice open-ended one for you there.
Yeah, that one's a very much it depends question for sure. I'll zoom out here just to show this as an overview to explain. There are a number of factors that would go into answering something like that. Size of area is obviously a big one. Right? This is a fairly large area, but the other important factor is how complex and what attributes do you want, how many attributes. So the attributes themselves, like in this case here, it's a very large area, but the attributes are fairly simple for us. So this is one of the largest single one project that we did, and it was done under 2 months. That was because the attributes are somewhat simplistic. But then you could have projects that are smaller, but there's a lot more post-processing involved, like I mentioned about the stratification. That gets into, okay, you produce the raw data, but now you have to do a lot of manipulation after the fact to create, and then it's also working with the client to make decisions around how do you want that delineation completed and then grouped. So that can take a fair bit of time, but it's still in the matter of months, not years. Like some projects, I understand for forest inventory, they can go a long time because there's no, the difference with this type of analysis, there's no need to go out and capture remote sensing information. It's already available for us. So we don't have to wait on that lag time before we start producing the analysis. So that certainly speeds things up. So overall, within a couple of weeks to a month of lead time to schedule a project in, depending on the production team, and then you're talking weeks to a couple of months to produce the outcome.
Okay, thanks, Maurice. Right. We have another one in from Ashley or two. I'll take this one, Maurice. So, what potential markets are GSI looking to expand their services into? I read a brief article about GSI's work in Kenya. So, as I said at the top of the webinar, in terms of describing us and where we are and our focus is very much in North America. That specific project and contract, Ashley, in Kenya was with another company working under money from the UK government and the UK Space Agency, where we were brought in as a specialist subcontractor in terms of remote sensing. So it was an opportunity, and our partner, the prime contractor, asked us to come in and specifically look at something. It was to do with geothermal projects in Kenya and looking at the boundaries and land rights and so on. So it's very, very specific. And that's so the short answer is it's not an area we'd be looking at, certainly at the moment, in terms of looking into. Our focus is very much, again, on commercial forestry, North America would be the answer to that. Another one from Jeff. Jeff, you're busy here. So, wanted to know the image source, not the training data source. Thank you.
Sorry, misinterpreted that. In terms of the images that we use are primarily from Sentinel-2, which is a satellite constellation from the European Space Agency, and the refresh rate on that is in a matter of weeks, kind of 1 to 2 weeks. And then of course we have to deal with clouds because it's not always, it takes an image regardless of whether there's cloud or not. So we have to be choosy on the scenes that we use, but we also have really good masking and filtering to go through all of those images and pick the spots that are clouded. Because once you combine all the images together, it's best to have as many images as you can, but not all images are always clear. But typically there's enough of a clear spot in the images all combined that there's usually enough for a good project. And we've not come across an area yet where cloud was an issue, other than we've done some projects, like I said, in Kenya, but other projects that we've done in areas that are typically very cloudy. So those were challenges, but in North America, it's not been an issue. I hope that answers your question. But we do include Landsat as well. It depends. Depends on how many scenes we have with Sentinel-2, but we can include NASA and Modus as well sometimes.
Okay, thanks, Maurice. So I have another question here, another nice open-ended one, which I'll field, which is on pricing. So the question is about pricing, and what does pricing look like here? You wouldn't be surprised to hear me say it depends entirely on your area of interest, the number of, in this case, Sentinel tiles that are involved, what your specific requirements are in terms of number of attributes and so on and so forth. So putting all those dependencies together, it's not possible to give a kind of a vanilla price for the work we do. It is quite complex, very specific in terms of the customer requirements, your requirements, and then what we would do, we would put a process is reasonably simple. You give us your requirements, area of interest, and so on. We would then put a quotation together for you against those specific requirements, put a statement of work together, and hopefully we can then work together to answer your questions and give you the answers that you need for either you or your customer. So what I would suggest on that one in terms of that question, the easiest way is in the final slide, you'll see I mentioned Stuart Miller at the top of the webinar. Any questions in terms of specific pricing or quotations, please get in contact with Stuart Miller. His name is Stuart at surfaceintelligence.com. He'll be able to get back to you with any specific inquiries. And I think
sorry, Peter, I'll just take over for a second. One thing
sure.
I realized I didn't show is the lead species layer for this particular area.
Yeah.
So like I described it in Ontario in the slide, we did produce one for here that's pretty simplistic. It's just simply showing you for any one pixel what is the species with the most proportion. And so it's just, this is a really good layer to use as an overview. You can see very quickly where the plantations are, loblolly, for example. The runs, wet runs are clearly different species. So it's useful to use as a general layer to look at. Okay,
thanks, Maurice. Well, I can't see any more questions coming in. So as I say, very much enjoyed your company today. Sorry we can't see you or talk directly to you, but really appreciate you coming along, sharing, giving us all your time, listening to the description about GSI in terms of what it is we do. We're just about on time, a few minutes within our allocated time. So I'll probably call a halt there. As I say, if you've got any questions, we'd be absolutely delighted to talk to you and be in a position to answer your questions again. So many thanks for your company today. It's been great. And I'll say bye from the UK and Maurice from up there in New Brunswick. Been great to have your company.
Perfect. Thank
Bye
you.
for now.